Hello and welcome to this install guide of how to install Arch Linux in 15 minutes or less. Now, I'm doing this inside of a Windows VM. This will work whether you're using a live USB or not. This is just demonstrating on how you would do it without actually physically recording a screen. So first off, we'll go with the usual setup. So I'll just type Arch Linux. Arch Linux is a thing that gets picked up by VirtualBox automatically, so I'm more than happy for that. We'll just give it a nice amount of RAM, just usual 4 gigs will do perfectly for this job. We will go create a virtual disk, leave it as VDI, and we'll go dynamically allocated. That won't matter for the moment. We will go for 40 gigs just as a nice safe region. We'll go with the settings and then system. We've got 4 gigs of RAM. We'll go for a 4-core system. Give it the max amount of video memory we can do of 128 megabytes of RAM. That's a lot of that's a lot of V memory to VirtualBox apparently. Then we'll select our ISO. The version I'm using is Arch Linux, the latest version at the time of recording. I could be wrong, but that's the version I have at the minute. We will select that and then hit OK. From this point onwards, it's mostly just click and play, no bother. We want to tell it to, if you've got other VMs or just this scenario, I have other ISOs and such, we will tell it to launch Arch Linux. How I managed to obtain my Arch Linux is I downloaded it through a torrent, just easier that way. Tell it to, you want to install Arch Linux install medium x86-64 BIOS. You do not want to boot from existing hardware. Probing EDD, that doesn't matter. That appears to be virtual machine specific, from what I can tell. I could quite easily be wrong. At this point, it's just going through the restart procedure, and now we are currently at the root terminal inside the installer. As previously mentioned, you can see we are now currently inside the install area for Arch. You can tell this by the root being red and it's saying root at Arch ISO. It'll always say at Arch ISO when you're using install media, just so you know where you're working from. So at this point, we will just do a quick and simple ping test to ensure that we are connected to the internet, which we are, which is good. From this point onwards, we will do a couple simple checks. The first one we will be doing is ls blk. This just goes, okay, can I have a look at the drives, please? And goes from there. STA, it will be where we're installing to today. That is the drive we are installing to. So let's just clear our window out. Next, we want to do cf disk. Now, when it comes to choosing a label type, this is just how it gets partitioned. For anything under 2 terabytes, it's advised to go with the DOS label type. This is what I will be using today, as I'm installing to only 40 gigabytes. So we'll select this. We'll also be using the grub bootloader. So we will go new. Only 128 megabytes of storage is needed for grub, because grub is not that bloaty. It is fine. We'll then select primary. Now we have this. We'll then select free space, new, hit enter, hit primary, and that's the rest of the storage taken up. Now we need to go back up and press B. You notice that asterisk that has appeared under the boot? This is just saying this is the bootloader. This is where it will be installed. So this is the point where you now have to hit right on your arrow keys and then hit right. And then you have to type out yes, because if you do not type out yes, it will not write it. Once that has been written, you can then hit quit, clear that, and then ls blk once more, and now you can see STA, STA1, and STA2. You've got your bootloader, and you got the rest of the storage. That means that has been successfully written. The next thing we want to do, after doing that, we want to tell it to go make a file system of the ext4 format to dev SDA1 and dev SDA2. That's been done. That worked perfectly. Clear the screen. Now this is the part where we come to mounting the various partitions to the system to then get it to work. So for this we want to do mount dev SDA2 to the mount partition. And now we want to do make directory in the, we want to make a boot directory. Now you can do this anywhere you like, but it's just common practice to make the boot partition inside mount boot. So make directory mount boot, no problems there. And now we want to mount the SDA1, so the bootloader, inside the mount directory. So we do this by going mount dev SDA1 inside the mount boot partition. Now that should work. We can find this out by doing ls-blk, and as we can see, the boot partition of 128 megabytes, which is where grub will be installed, has been mounted to mount boot, and the rest is just being put inside of mount. So far this is working fine. We will clear the screen. Now from this part, this is where the magic sauce comes in. We will be using a magic tool called Fstab. This is the part of Linux. Well, this is part of Arch, but the Arch elitists really don't like people finding out, because this is what does all of the installing for you. Linux, everything to go with it will just install with this one command. Fstab. Now we want the following things. We want to mount it to the mount directory. We need base, so you base operating, base devel, you base development tools, Linux, because you need Linux to install Linux, obviously, the Linux firmware, and we will be using Vim. And that'll now go through and install everything. Now this may take a while based off your internet connection and what you're doing at the time. So we will now just sit and wait for this to finish. Once everything's been downloaded and mounted correctly, it will output a time of how long it took. For me, it took me 1 minute 18.82 seconds, which is pretty decent considering it's downloading and also installing it all, which is pretty damn good. So at this point, this is important. You need to generate a Fstab file to say, hey, look, this is where all the boot stuff will be. So you can do that via gen fstab. Now, what I'm going to do here is go tac u. That u is saying, hey, look at the UUID identifiers for the partitions. Now, if you don't do this, it'll just go, oh, look, I will assign the install directories for the boot, for the grub, to the SDAs. Now, as you, if you're a seasoned Linux user or not, you know drive letters exist. Now, with Linux, you've got your SDAs. That's how it's done. And whenever drives change in the system, it'll update that, and it could change a drive letter. So to avoid that, you can then set it up to do it via the UUID identifier of a drive. This will never ever change. So you can do this without having to worry. Once you've done that, do /mnt to mount, and then tell it to put it into mount etc fs tab. I didn't chuck me any errors, so that means it's worked fine. This is the part where we now have to go into chroot, and we'll be doing stuff inside the installed system. So to do that, we'll be doing arch chroot mnt bin bash. We're now currently sat inside. We've now left the installer and we're now inside the installed system. We're working inside the installed system. We're no longer inside the installer. So this is the part where we'll now be downloading and installing Network Manager and Grub. Now, with Arch and Arch-based operating systems such as Manjaro, to install things you can use either Pacman or the Arch user repository files. For this point, we will be using Pacman. This is just your package installer. For Windows folk using Linux for the first time, this is just your general installer. That can be done with Pacman. And then we will go -s for install, and then it'll be Network Manager, all one word, and Grub. Now, those being separate, saying, hey, look, this is two separate things. I want to work with these. Hit enter. It'll then go, hey, can I have these dependencies, please? You tell it yes to install, and then it'll work its magic in the background. This will obviously depend on how fast your internet connection is and how powerful your system is. I did have to go back and change the RAM allocators to the virtual machine, as there was a little bit of issues, but now I can see it's working fine. So now that Network Manager and Grub is installed, we need to do the following commands. We need to enable the system control for Network Manager. Now, because this is a separate process, we need to specify Network Manager with the capital N and M. This is for your networking stuff to work in the background. So I then hit enter. That's done correctly, because it's now, as you can see, it says created symlink, so that's working fine. There's been no issues. This is good. Now, what we want to do next, after doing that, is do, we will be installing Grub now. So we go grub-install into, as previously mentioned, the boot partition. So dev SDA, and then hit enter. This then go, ooh, installation finished, no errors. Good news. Next thing we want to do is generate a configuration for Grub. So Grub, make the config with the O tac in the boot /grub/grub config, so CFG. Hit enter. That's done. So at this point in time, you now want to create a password for the root users. So you can do that with passwd and then go password. For example, because it's just a VM, I will just use Nick. Done. Password update successfully. Now, this is the part where things may get tricky for new users of Linux or Vim, for example. Vim is a text editor that is used a lot by Arch users. It's seen as this elitist text editor, when realistically, it's not. Everything's been working. I do need to mention, when you make the grub config, if you see the found Linux image found in its RD, if it finds them when you've made the grub config, everything's fine. You've done good so far. If it can't find them, you did not packstrap correctly, and you need to go back and do that again. From this point onwards, we will now be doing the locale stuff. This is for your keyboard and all that fancy stuff. I'm just saying, hey, look, this is how I use it. So to do that, we go vim/etc locale.gen, and it goes, oh look at all this. This is the configuration file for your locale stuff. Now, to be able to use Vim, you need to hit insert on your keyboard if your keyboard has it, or just smack the keyboard until your keyboard starts to do stuff. As I'm in the American region, I'll be using ENUS for my keyboard. So just scroll down until I get to ENUS, and then I will be using the UTF-8 standard. So I just need to comment that out. So I now have ENUS UTF-8. Now you do Control C, colon, right, quit, hit enter. That's now been done. The locale file has been changed to your specific configuration. I'm using the UTF-8 standard. Once that's done, I just do locale gen. It's generating locale. Locale's been generated. No problems from this point onwards. Now we need to create a locale configuration. We do this with vim /etc locale.conf. As there is no current configuration, we need to write only a couple words here. We go language equals en hyphen us.utf8, or if you're using the ISO standard, en hyphen us dot the ISO standard. I hit Control C, colon, right, quit, enter. That's been written, one line at 16 bytes written. Very lightweight stuff. So at this point in time, you want to create a host name for your system. For this, I will just be going with, you need to do this with vim as well. So you do vim /etc hostname. Now at this point you can choose what you want. For this, I will just be doing insert, and then be going tut to tutorial, and then go Control C, colon, right, quit, enter. One line of 4 bytes written. No bother. Now, here is where things might get a bit tricky. You need to be, at this point I was just saying, hey look, this is my time zone. This is what zone I'm in for Linux. So this is done with the following command, ln-sf. Now this, your time zone stuff is in the user folder, share zone. As I'm in the American New York zone, all I need to do now is just go America. Now you can hit tab, as I have done here. It's caused me an issue, so I would advise against it because there is a lot of time zones. Again, advise against doing it here because the amount of American time zones there are. So for me, as I'm in the New York time zone, just type New York, just a quick Google for you, and you'll be figure it out. And then say, okay, this is my local time. Problem solved. Right, now you want to do exit. Exit spelled correctly. We've now exited. And you need to do unmount recursively everything that is in MNT. Hit yes. Everything that was there has now been unmounted. And now we just do reboot. Now at this point in time, because I still have the install media plugged in, I can just go boot existing OS. Grub's worked. Everything is working good. I'll let it load up. And there we go. We now have a working thing. Pacman. Now at this point you can just install NeoFetch. So this will prove to you that this is working. And then go, oops, I realized my mistake there. Now if you accidentally add any character onto the end of your yes command, it won't actually install it correctly, like I accidentally did there. Clear. NeoFetch. And we now have a working Arch install. This has been your how-to video on how to install Arch as fast as possible. Now, this could be done faster, this could be streamlined, but this is just an easy way of installing Arch Linux. There is no need for this boogeyman stuff. Arch is really not this hard to install. It's not really that hard to install. In upcoming videos, I'll show you how to install various install various displays such as suckler, any suckler software such as DWM, i3, and maybe even, and I'll also be doing a KDE video somewhere in the future. Thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment down below if you've got any issues or any problems. Leave a comment. I'll respond to you and try and help you the best I can. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.